they have to accomplish that at home. And I just need to have feedback on that every single week.
I love it. Thank you. So here we go. We're ready to launch this thing. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate Aaron and Joel as amazing partners in Piano Model. Aaron is the guy that 10 years ago started putting this all together. And he's the visionary. He's the guy that inspires, literally hundreds of teachers all around the world. Joel is the guy that keeps us all together. He's the guy that helps us from an infrastructure as a company and from a technology and from a development standpoint, really helping us get our product better for you. We have 6 full-time developers, some days 7. And he's the one that orchestrates all the information that we're learning from you and what we need to implement in the technology with all the developers and making sure that becomes a reality in the product. And so we're going to have Joel present, and then Aaron, and then back to Joel, and then we're going to take a quick break.
All right. Well, we're really excited to have all of you here for our conference. What is this, the 3rd year we've done the piano teacher conference? The first one we held in Colorado, and we came here to Utah last year, and it was such a great experience having Dane's Music support us in this and everything that we wanted to come back and do it again, and we really appreciate Kerwin's help and Skip and everybody that's helped put this together. If you haven't taken an opportunity to check out everything they have here in the showroom and everything, it's just amazing. They've got only the best here, and it's exactly what you want to be using, and ideally your students as well, and everything they pick, even with their digital keyboards and such. They work with the best, so we're really appreciative of everything that they do to help put that on together. We're also really appreciative of the travel, everybody who's come from different parts of the country to be here. And what we are working on creating in Piano Marvel is, I think, a bit of a cultural shift in the way that piano teaching happens. And so I'm hoping to kind of give you a little bit of a vision of that in what we're going to be discussing today. And that culture revolves around our students because, information is static. What do I mean by that? Information is just information. I can read a book. I can look up information online. A student can go and find everything they need to find about learning to play the piano with either books or a computer. But why would they be unsuccessful in that journey? What would cause them to essentially fail at learning the piano? Well, for one part, there would be no human connection, no emotion, nothing to drive that engine. There wouldn't be anything really fun or exciting about that, right? And that is what we as teachers need to introduce. We need to create that fun, nurturing environment for students that makes them want to learn more, that makes them really want to push. And if we are falling short in that area, that's where we lose a lot of students, right? Having multiple conversations with sheet music retailers, piano retailers, and such countrywide, what we see is that piano learning, piano sales, piano sheet music is all declining. And it's been in a decline for, actually, Kerwin, you'd probably know better than me specifically. I'd say the last 20, 25 years.
Yes, but it shrank the most dramatic in the last 10 years. It shrank by 2/3 its size in 10 years.
Shrank by 2/3, the piano market, industry, shrank by 2/3 in the past 10 years. That's kind of alarming. And so a lot of what we at Piano Marvel, when we're designing tools and we're designing methods and so forth, those are things that we're thinking about. Because obviously, it's a boat that we're all in together, right? And we could either figure out how to work together and make something that can reverse that trend, or we can see this continue on a downward spiral. So some of the factors that are causing this, I think we're gonna discuss a little bit. So I want you to think about this for a moment. This was written in Mashable. It says, technology has altered human physiology. It makes us think differently, feel differently, and even dream differently. It affects our memory, attention spans, and sleep cycles. It is attributed to a scientific phenomenon known as neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to alter its behavior based on new experiences. So many of you have probably heard of this neuroplasticity before, but essentially it is physical changes that your brain makes when you're learning a new skill. And the thing is that technology has changed that in a way, and it's come on so rapidly that you have to think for a moment that from your student's perspective, many of your students can't remember a time when iPads didn't exist, or they might barely remember that. They certainly can't remember a time when the internet didn't exist. That world doesn't exist for them. They've never experienced the world where, maybe there was a black and white TV in the corner, right? And that was it. They don't know what that's like. They don't know what that means. They don't understand that, how in the world would you find where you're going without your Maps app? How are you going to know how to get to this address? That's kind of crazy, right? Yeah, it's a lot easier, and I think all of us have kind of maybe gone that way, and maybe some of us have even forgotten, like, what did we do before that? I don't know, we drove around and asked people, like, do you know this person, right? Now everybody's like, that's weird. Why would I do that? I want to talk to people? Strangers? What? Right? This is something that, and the reason I bring this up, though, is that it's important for us to understand that your students' brains are quite literally different than yours. Not just because they're younger, but because of the world that they've grown up in is so much different than the world you grew up in. And if we first have to be willing to accept this as truth, because if we can't accept that our students are different than we are, we're going to have a really hard time communicating with them and getting any sort of point across to them. So we have to open our minds to say, look, the way that I was taught, the way that I did things when my teacher taught me, those were tailored for those times and what was available to them at that time and how children were being raised at that time. It's changed. It's different. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. The other thing that's different is that tools have changed. Highly interactive tools such as Piano Marvel, with highly interactive tools such as Piano Marvel, students have the ability to practice in ways that were previously not possible. For hundreds and hundreds of years, if you were to ask somebody, what tool should I use to cut down this tree? They would say, well, use an axe, duh. Right? It's the tool to use. That's what everybody's doing now. It's what the cool kids are doing, right? You use an axe. Well, times have changed a little bit. Nowadays, we say, never mind. This is a great tool for cutting down trees, right? Nobody's doing this anymore, right? Unless they are part of some strange, competition or which they do, the loggers. And it's pretty impressive, but it's still slower than this, right? And why is that? Well, I can chop down a tree an hour with this, or I can chop down 25 trees an hour with this, right? It's just a whole different world there. And so we also have to keep in mind that the tools in the music industry and specifically piano education have changed immensely. And we're not talking about, over the past 20, 25 years, more so in the last 7 or 8 years. Even within Piano Marvel, the tools have changed immensely in the past few years. I know from my personal experience, and Aaron could attest to this as well, the way that Aaron is using Piano Marvel in his lessons today is very different than what he was doing a year ago. Would you say that's true? And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is later on in the conference. But the main reason is because even in Piano Marvel, some of the tools have already changed. And I'm sure some of you have seen some of those, but it's this discovery process. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year or 2 years from now, we were able to sit here in this room and say the exact same thing again. It's different than what we were doing a year ago. And so it's important that we keep a very open mind as we're looking, because at the end of the day, when we find something that works better, that's where we got to take our ego, hang it on the shelf, and say, you know what? That was great, but I found something better. And that's what Piano Marvel is always looking for. And we will continue to find it because we are always experimenting and we're always pushing forward. Think for a moment about the practice session. And this is one of the big, important parts about Piano Marvel. The practice session is when we expect students to learn the most. It is also when the student is the most isolated, with little guidance, no feedback, and little to help motivate them. Now, I'm talking about our traditional piano teaching setup, where we give them some instruction and we send them home with a book. But that's when we want them to do the most learning, when they have no guidance. Hopefully they remember what you said, or you made a note and they actually read it in the book, right? I tried that so many times. I was like, did you read the note? Because I even tried to do good handwriting on that, and it just... And the other point I want to make is that distractions have changed and increased for your students. Now they've got band and soccer and homework and YouTube and cartoons and video games and all these other things that are a part of a child's life these days. And these are all things that we as music teachers kind of have to compete with for their attention, right? And if we can't make piano more fun and engaging, well, it's going to get lost in the mix here, okay? There was a time when, younger kids had like a choice of like 4 or 5 things that they might do with their spare time. Either work or, play baseball or a couple other things. But, nowadays, it's almost crazy how much we see these students being involved with. So we've also got to be aware of this point. And so that brings up the question, how does music compete with all of these distractions? Making it fun, I think, is at the forefront of how we address that issue. And a lot of what we've designed and developed in Piano Marvel is centered around that. A game-like environment that has a lot of the same principles that you'll find in any game. And I've got a graphic we'll look at here in a minute that illustrates that really well. But let's draw another contrast really quick to the way that traditional piano teaching kind of contrasts and how it may prioritize things. As an example, a traditional piano lesson may give a lot of weight to theory. I've seen many teachers bring in a new student and sit down with them, and they want to start off giving them a college-level theory, explanation. And this 6-year-old kid is like, okay, I thought piano was going to be cool, but they're reaching this realization very quickly that they're already thinking about other things they'd rather do. Technique. And you got to think about this for a minute. Why does traditional piano teaching prioritize things maybe in this sort of way? Repertoire. And this, I think, is kind of the key. This little note says, if it looks good on paper. And I would say the same thing for theory and technique. Why do many teachers start with theory? Well, because it makes them feel like they're doing the right thing, I think, because it does sound good on paper. Well, all of my students know what a major third is, and they know how to do this, and blah, 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 blah. And that's great, but if the students aren't having fun with what they're doing, this is not going to sustain and it's not going to last. Practice techniques, recital preparation, and somewhere eventually, maybe they'll find room for a little bit of fun down here. They might. Hopefully you can read that. It's small font.
Is that an exclamation point?
Yeah, it's really enthusiastic. Little bit of fun down there, right? I had a piano teacher tell me one time, I don't get it. Halfway through teaching my student, his federation pieces, he quit. And they were perplexed by this. This is the way I translate that. My student wants to learn piano, but my teaching path only looks good on paper. He isn't patient enough to jump through the hoops my teachers made me jump through. And that's a point I think that we're trying to draw some contrast between what the old school traditional piano teaching is and why it needs to change and how we can do that. The thing is that people a lot of times are creatures of habit, right? And we a lot of times want to say, well, I learned piano this way, and this is the way my teacher taught me, so this is the way I'm going to teach as well. And there's, besides everything that we already talked about, there's one really big issue with that statement, and that is if you took a room and filled it full of 1,000 people, 1,000 young kids, and gave them all traditional piano lessons, and then the ones who lost interest and weren't patient enough fell out little by little by little over the years, guess what you're left with? We're left with you right here. You were the ones that were patient enough to stick with it, to go through. Your friends that quit piano, all that, they just didn't have the patience to go through that process. So, that's a common quality you see not just among piano, but any musician. They tend to be generally more patient people because everybody else is like, this is ridiculous, I'm going to go do something else, right? So it's kind of a compliment that I just gave you. Music is like a game, and some people want to play Chutes and Ladders, others want to play Doom 3. What does that mean? If you don't know what Doom 3 is, it's a bad video game, like you're shooting monsters and stuff. The thing is that when we're talking about repertoire, again, a lot of times we want to say, well, this looks good, and if my student learns this and this, and they play this at the recital, it's going to make me look awesome. Well, again, if we think of music like a game, it would be like if you just hated Monopoly. You just hated Monopoly. But I said, hey, we're going to play Monopoly. And you're like, no, I want to play something else. No, we're going to play Monopoly. You're just not going to have fun. You're just not going to enjoy your evening. Besides the fact that even people who love Monopoly end up wanting to strangle each other by the end anyways. But so think of that point as how music is like a game. Traditional music teaching is not designed to teach those who love music. It is designed to weed out the ones that do not have the patience to become the ideal student. You can take his picture of that if you like. It's kind of simple, but it's unfortunately very true. And this is what I was talking about the piano industry earlier, is that we kind of self-sabotage a little bit when us as teachers are not really making it fun and engaging and exciting for the student, because we're too concerned about what looks good for me as the teacher. If I can say, well, my students did the federation, or my students did this method, or they do these repertoire pieces, but at the same time, we don't realize we're also strangling the fun, and we're actually killing that love of music rather than cultivating it. So back to this question, how do we make it fun? And the thing is that focusing on theory and technique and all that, that is all, I'm not saying in any ways we don't teach theory and that we don't teach technique. We absolutely do. But if we're more focused on the fun, then the other parts of it, the desire that they have to learn theory, to learn technique, to learn these repertoire pieces, eventually will come to them. And when they're excited about it and they want to learn those concepts, I was teaching a student not too long ago, and out of the blue, they had questions about seventh chords, because they came up in the song and they were excited to learn this song, and they'd seen seventh chords before, but they didn't fully understand them. And I'm 100% confident that because that student was asking the question, I was able to explain it in a way that was going to stick in his mind. And if I had explained it to him years ago when he was, 7 or 8, he would have long forgot about that and not even cared.
So do you understand how well you just described Dr. Suzuki's philosophy? Which is,
There's a lot of similarities.
yeah, because he's really saying we're mimicking how children learn to speak.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
We're exposing them to these ideas. That student saw the seventh chord, probably played the seventh chord multiple times, but until their desire was there to understand it theoretically, there was no reason to teach the theory.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So let's think about this for a second. What makes games fun? What makes a game fun? Well, there needs to be some kind of a challenge. If a game doesn't have a challenge, you cannot have fun. But the challenge can't be too easy and it can't be too hard. Going back to Monopoly for a minute, if you've played Monopoly, you know there's a point in the game where somebody is just absolutely crushing everybody else on the board. It just happens that way. And then everybody else is just, everything they land on, they're paying out money, right? Well, guess what? That's when, for the person who's winning, and they're just collecting money, they start feeling just bad for everybody else, right? And it's so easy, it's not fun anymore. Like, you're just like, yeah, I've got 900 hotels, good luck, right? You're gonna get $200 and then pay me $2,500 in the next turn. You just already know the game's over, and it's like a formality at that point, right? But if it's too hard, you're just frustrated and you feel like it's not fair, right? And any game needs to have some kind of a system, a reward, points, Monopoly money, whatever, right? So you've got this reward / feedback. And in the middle, you're going to have engagement, excitement, and fun. Okay? Does this remind you of Piano Marvel a little bit? Because that's exactly what it does. That's exactly what we put in place. Now, it is possible to facilitate a challenge and a reward in a lesson. Absolutely. We can do that. We can facilitate that in a live setting. But this is nearly impossible for students to experience when they're just practicing at home on a book. Some students manage to make that work a little bit, and it does become a game, but they still have no score, no feedback, nothing to really tell them how well they're actually doing. And this is where Piano Marvel brings that into the practice session and allows the student to continue with this excitement and this engagement that you normally don't get in a practice session. Okay, and I think that's one thing that really needs to be emphasized about Piano Marvel is it really was initially designed to be a tool for the practice session. And as we've gone on, we've realized it's so much more, it can be so much more than that, and we've developed a lot of tools for that. But at the core and the heart of Piano Marvel was fixing the practice session. And actually, I think I just got ahead. But I'm going to go through this next little part a little bit quicker because we're running short on time. So this main problem, and this is, I think, a picture of Aaron in college. He was thinking about this issue. The question was, how do I get students to have fun and practice effectively at home? And that also led us to ask, what tools are there to help students have fun and know if they are practicing correctly? Which also made us realize, oh bother, as one often says, there isn't anything out there that will give accurate feedback to students as they practice at home, helping them avoid bad habits that I'll have to correct in their lessons, all while having fun. There just wasn't anything that could do that. So that made us say, better give up. It's too hard. And actually, that was kind of true for a while. But after thinking about it some more, we decided to tackle the problem, kind of like that. And what we resulted in was to say that technology needed to be implemented into this solution. So why? Because technology is fun. It's available 24/7. It goes where the student goes. It's great at repetitive tasks, which we as teachers get extremely annoyed with. It's like probably, in my opinion, is the worst part of teaching, is going over and saying, oh, no, remember I told you last week that was a B flat. Oh, remember I showed you last week the rhythm goes like this. Oh, just over and over and over, right? Well, technology doesn't mind doing that. The Piano Marvel can do that with them 24/7 if they wanted. It's highly accurate in giving its feedback, and it provides a high level of engagement. Teachers and people are good at artistry, expression, emotion, accountability, creating an emotional connection, and facilitating the lesson. So sometimes we get the question, people will call up and they're almost a little upset and they say, well, why doesn't Piano Marvel assess dynamics? Why doesn't Piano Marvel assess these articulations? The short answer, technology is terrible at that kind of thing. Computers aren't good at expressive tasks, at emotion. Why would we try to, it's like, trying to train a squirrel to do your taxes. It just doesn't make sense, right? Technology is really good at this. People are good at this. So Piano Marvel is focused on what technology can do for your students really, really well. Teachers focus on what they do really well. And as a result, the student in the middle experiences, sorry that's a bit small, but faster progress. They feel supported. They have accountability and excitement about learning music.
My way of saying that is the Piano Marvel does all the bad guy stuff.
It does the bad guy stuff. That's a good way to put it. Aaron, do you mind if we go about like 5 minutes over? Okay. We should be almost done here. So That's right. No, I like that. That's a really good way to say it. It does the bad guy
So I
stuff.
don't have to be the bad guy.
You're absolutely right. And here's the thing, and I wasn't going to mention this, but since you brought that up, I think it's a great point, is that when you tell a student, oh, that's the wrong note, that's the wrong rhythm, such and such, they feel judged. And I've tried so many times to say as nicely and politely as I can, that's not how it goes. And I still had students break down in tears in a lesson. And you're just like, it's okay, don't worry, it's okay. But they feel judged and they feel shame about that. Well, when Piano Marvel tells them it was a wrong note, it's like a game. That's like, ah, darn it, I'm gonna try that again. If they didn't get it right, well, I'm gonna do it again, I'm gonna do it again. They're gonna keep going until they get that 100%, and they work for that trophy. And by the way, we're going to be doing, if any of this seems to go a little bit out of context for you, later today we're going to be offering, Sean's going to be doing a training for people who are very new to Piano Marvel or relatively new. So he's going to take a breakout session with a group. Do you know what time that's at, Sean? Right after lunch. So if you feel a little bit lost on any of this, it's okay, and you'd like to just go over the basics, Sean's going to have you covered there, okay? And this is kind of the last point I'd like to make here. Piano Marvel is like the trainer, and the teacher is like the coach. Athletes have trainers to improve their speed, agility, and accuracy. They have a coach to help them assimilate these skills into something that is greater than the sum of their parts, its parts. This is an important distinction because we've had many times over the years teachers come to us and say, well, wait, is Piano Marvel going to replace me as a teacher? And they misunderstand what the role is, right? They don't understand how does that fit? Well, the coach isn't necessarily there all the time while the athlete is training, right? They go to the workout, they go to the gym. They're working with the trainer at that point. The coach just wants them to show up to practice and perform, right? But if they're not training effectively outside and doing their push-ups, well, they're going to underperform when it comes time to work with the coach. So think about that separation of how Piano Marvel differs and what its role is. And hopefully that gave you a little bit of a picture of that. Later on, I'm going to be talking a little bit more specifically about how Piano Marvel can fit specifically into the studio. And hopefully it'll give you some ideas. I've already heard some great comments this morning from some of you while you were giving your introductions about how you're using Piano Marvel a little bit. And it's really encouraging to me to hear that because I feel that a lot of you already have a wonderful mindset about it. But we're going to pass the time on over to Aaron. He has the next 45 minutes, 40 to 60 minutes here that he'd like to talk to you. You got your mic on?
I think I do.